Here is the slide we left off with on the last video. I wanted to start with this as we talk a little bit more about fetal development and pregnancy. The placenta is this incredible organ that is a combination of maternal and fetal tissues. We see the umbilical cord that is what's responsible for our belly buttons later on. The umbilical cord brings blood from the fetus into the placenta, and those umbilical arteries carry deoxygenated blood that is nutrient poor, carries that blood to the placenta, and then branches into networks of what are called villi. And those fill up these sinuses where maternal blood, which is rich in oxygen, rich in nutrients, and low in wastes, actually spills out of maternal arteries and bathes the capillaries from the fetus's circulation. And so the exchange of wastes and nutrients takes place very efficiently with the waste products in the baby's blood diffusing out into this cavity, and nutrients from the mother's blood diffusing into the baby's capillaries. And so the blood that leaves the placenta and returns to the fetal circulation is now high in oxygen, high in nutrients, and low in wastes. And the baby is dependent upon the mother's organ systems to do a lot of the hard work for it. And because of the importance of the placenta during fetal development, the circulatory system of a fetus looks different in some really important ways than our circulatory system looks for the rest of our lives. You can see in the picture here, this is a fetus, and there's the umbilical cord connected to the placenta. And, well, during our fetal development, we have two major arteries that branch off of our femoral arteries. Those are the two big arteries that lead down into our legs. And those arteries are the two umbilical arteries that carry blood to the placenta. And then there is a large umbilical vein that returns the blood back to the fetal circulation. So these vessels, which are large and absolutely essential vessels to the fetus's growth and development, those are going to disappear very shortly after birth. And what happens is we have smooth muscle that surrounds our blood vessels, and very shortly after birth, smooth muscles will contract and pinch off the blood vessels that connect to, this is the inferior vena cava, the big vein that brings blood back to the heart. And it will also close off these two vessels where the umbilical arteries branch off the femoral arteries. The other major differences in the circulation are in the heart or near the heart. There is an opening called the foramen ovale. That foramen is a window. That's sort of what foramen means. So there is an opening that connects the right atrium and the left atrium of the heart. Now, normally blood returns from the inferior and superior vena cava. These are the big veins that feed blood back to our heart. Normally that blood goes to the right atrium, to the right ventricle, and then out to the lungs to get oxygen. But that ain't the way it works in a fetus, because the lungs are not taking in any air. So it would be wasteful to send our blood, all of our blood, through our lungs during our fetal development. And so this window allows a lot of the blood that comes back to the right atrium of the heart to spill right on over to the left atrium and then go from the left ventricle out to the rest of the body. So remember the blood that's coming back from the placenta is going to come back here and enter the right atrium. Now that blood already has oxygen because it got it from the placenta. And so we can skip the lungs for the most part. And there is some blood that goes to the lungs because we have to keep the lung tissue alive and healthy as well. But instead of sending all of our blood through what is essentially our double circulation, heart to lungs and heart to body, we just send a little bit of blood to our lungs. And most of the blood that returns from the placenta goes straight to the body. There is another vessel here that you can see. It's called the ductus arteriosus. This is another way to bypass the lungs. And this is, during fetal development, a blood vessel that connects the pulmonary artery. This is the big artery that goes to the lungs. It connects the pulmonary artery to the aorta, which goes to the body instead. And so as the blood goes out and would travel to the lungs, instead quite a bit of it is bypassed into the circulation that goes to the body. So we have significant change in our circulation, and within minutes after a baby is born, this foramen ovale closes up, and the ductus arteriosus, this vessel, pinches off, and these other large vessels that are connected to the baby's circulatory system will also squeeze and pinch off and stop the flow of blood, and then our sort of adult circulation takes over for the rest of our lives. Here is a diagram showing the different stages of the birth process, and probably you guys have seen something like this before, and if not, we can certainly talk about it later. But the birth process is often split up into these three stages. The dilation, the opening, means the dilation of the cervix. That's the structure that separates the uterus, where the fetus is developing, from the vagina, which is the birth canal. And that keeps the baby in and keeps the baby safe while it's developing. But for the baby to get out, it's got to open up. And so we talk about the cervix dilating, opening up. And it's considered fully dilated, and the mother's ready to deliver the child when it's about 10 centimeters in diameter. And then the birth stage is when the baby is actually being delivered, and most of the time the baby comes out head first, and ideally the baby will come out with the crown, the top of their head first, because that's a nice hard thing to push against the cervix and open it up. When a baby comes out feet first or bottom first, it's called a breech birth, and that can also happen. It's a little higher risk. It's a little more dangerous for the baby and the mother, but it can also happen. The third stage is the afterbirth, and this is when the placenta is delivered. This typically happens a few minutes after the baby is born, and the placenta, which is attached to the wall of the uterus, will break away, and it will be a bloody mess. In the wild, lots and lots of mammals, after giving birth, mammal moms, will eat their placenta. And while this has a pretty significant gross out effect for most people, it makes perfect sense. The mother has just been through a strenuous ordeal. She will have bled. She will have lost a significant amount of blood during the birth process. And, well, what has just fallen down on the ground, this big bloody placenta, is an extremely nutrient-rich meal that will replace a lot of what she's lost through the birth process in terms of the blood loss and the nutrient loss. And it's an easy meal. So lots of mammals eat their placenta after birth. So this is just describing the interesting positive feedback loop of hormones and uterine contractions that's responsible for getting the baby out of the womb. Most of the time in biology, processes are controlled by negative feedback, where, for example, If our body temperature gets too high, we start to sweat, which cools us off, and our body temperature drops. There's a stimulus that causes a response that will move us in the opposite direction of the stimulus. With birth and the uterine contractions that are responsible for pushing the baby out of the uterus, we want to keep pushing harder and harder until the baby is out. And that positive feedback loop leads to stronger and stronger and longer uterine contractions until the baby is born. And the sort of starting point, although this is a cycle, we can think of the starting point being the pressure of the baby's head pushing against the cervix. That pressure is detected by nerves. Signals are sent to the brain. The brain releases a hormone that causes the uterine to contract more, the uterine muscles to contract more. That's more pressure on the cervix, more stimulus to the brain, more oxytocin, more contractions, more pressure, and it builds to greater and greater contractions, lasting longer and longer, until the baby's born. And then the pressure on the cervix is gone, and this positive feedback loop is broken. Lactation is another uniquely mammalian characteristic, and we get the name of our group, mammals, or the class Mammalia, from the fact that we produce milk to nourish our young. And it is a fascinating process, a brilliant process. Evolution has done a fine job, where the stimulus and production almost always match each other quite nicely. When a baby nurses more and more, the mother produces more and more milk. So I'll let you pause the video and read the notes that I have there. Some people find it a bit off-putting that mammary glands are modified sweat glands. So that's what milk is. It's a kind of nutrient-rich sweat, but it's a uniquely mammalian trait that is certainly one of the things responsible for the success of mammals. So pause this and read over those notes if you would like. And this is just describing that supply and demand loop that I mentioned. The more the baby suckles, that stimulus is detected by nerve cells, which send a message to the mother's brain. In response to that stimulus, she releases two hormones, oxytocin and prolactin. Those two hormones are responsible for milk production and the release of the milk. Prolactin stimulates milk production, and oxytocin stimulates the ejection or the letdown of milk. And so the more the baby nurses, the more prolactin, the more milk is produced. And the letdown of milk, when the milk actually starts to come out of the mother's nipple, again, it's based on this stimulus of the suckling. And when the baby starts to nurse, within a few seconds, the milk will start to let down and be available for the baby. Breastfed babies are healthier. This is a fascinating thing that medicine and culture and society sort of experimented with back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where doctors kind of supposed that science could produce better nourishment for a baby than nature could. So formulas were created and mothers were liberated from the burden of nursing, when in fact probably nursing is a whole lot simpler for most mothers, certainly not for all, but it's a whole lot simpler than having to make formula, sterilize a bunch of bottles, and do that on demand for the baby. And in fact, we know that nursing provides a number of different health benefits. Breastfed babies are smarter, they have higher IQs than babies who are formula fed, and they are healthier in terms of their immune system. They have fewer serious childhood infections or diseases, and they have fewer problems with allergies and autoimmune diseases, because during these early stages of their life, when the child's immune system is developing, so you can see in birth in the first year, the child's own antibodies are very low. The child's immune system is not working very, very effectively. But during those months, if the baby is being breastfed, it's receiving lots of help with its immune system from the mother.